I mean, it's ludicrous that you would ticket this man every night because Mr. Calora says, and I understand you correctly, that's why I'm questioning this, that he has 2 commercial vehicles in his driveway every night because his family lives with him. So I think that, and I'm not sure how it would be, and I understand your point, I do, because I live in an area where such a thing is. So I think you have to go back and say, perhaps define what type of, commercial vehicles obstruct emergency lanes.
I think part of that, and as you were talking, I'm just thinking of the commercial vehicle and the commercial plates and the truck and everything else. But if it's a single axle, then I'm thinking single axles are probably least of our issues because it represents a car,
Right.
a pickup truck, but it happens to have commercial plates. So I mean, so I could work for Nikon and you could be working for Nextel, and at the end of the day, 2 different companies, we're both out there, we both drive their trucks, but if they're in our driveway overnight, that represents a problem. So who's gonna be able to park in the driveway? Me or you, whoever comes home first. So then what do we do with the second car? But I think a single axle, I think where I'm going with this is a single axle car, maybe we exempt that, or we relook at that somehow, because I think if you're looking at dual axles or axles with 4 tires, like small dump trucks and things that can get large and be the issue, then I think we just, zero in on that a little bit.
Well, you gotta also go back to the base issue, which is a residential neighborhood. It's not a commercial neighborhood, it's a residential neighborhood.
And that was
That's another thing we were looking at.
That was
Well, no,
the
and you're right, but you're taking the commercial, and I'm saying either carve it out or relook at the single axle vehicle
A van is single
What do you mean
axle.
single axle?
A van is.
of your truck.
That's
You put
2 axles on my truck. Otherwise it won't.
rear axle. We'll specify, unless your car can drive around like this. Right, so 1 rear axle could be your pickup truck. If you have
You're
commercial
talking about
plates,
dual wheels, that's still an axle.
and well, that's what I'm trying to, I guess, define. If
Yeah,
you
but-
have 1 axle with 4 tires, a rear axle with 4 tires, that's, I mean, you even have pickup trucks that
The
way.
law defines commercial vehicle. And if we start to, then you're opening a can of worms, because then how many people are gonna live, he's my nephew, he lives with me, and he has a truck, and,
But wait
well,
a
I
minute,
mean,
wait a minute. A
no.
lot of people get cars with their jobs.
the,
A lot of people do drive cars
and
with
the
their jobs.
intent of this was to preserve residential areas as residential areas.
And I understand that, I do. But you're talking about people who are driving small pickups for their, I know many people who get a car with their job, or who get a small truck with their job. The DEC gives out cars for their drivers, for some of their positions. So I think you have to define, as Tom is talking about, I know what kind of truck you're talking about, and I know what kind of situation you're talking about. I do. But I think you have to better define, to eliminate people who get cars or small vehicles with their job. Because a lot of these people use, I mean, if you're given if you're given a car with your job, and it's got a commercial plate on it or whatever, you're gonna drive that car. Because that's what you're supposed to do.
It has to be a fairly good-sized truck to have a commercial plate, to
No,
be
doesn't
required
have to.
commercial plate.
3/4 ton or more has to have a commercial plate because it goes by the weight of the vehicle.
I mean, if the DEC gives somebody a small pickup truck or a car, it probably has a plate.
State plates.
I think
Then they probably have the signs on the sides.
Yeah, because you're gonna
the
color
sign-
the car with the display being in contrast
Yeah.
for that of the vehicle.
Right, but you kept saying they gave the car, What about somebody that has a business, right now their home, who they keep getting these cars, they're buying these cars, They're buying these trucks,
I
they're buying these
understand, I
trailers.
understand where you're going with this, I do, I understand where you're going with this. But that's different, that's a whole different enchilada than somebody having a small vehicle that they have as a commercial vehicle for their job or whatever, than what you're talking about. And I do understand what you're talking about, I do. So, and I think a distinction has to be made. If you have, how many people have kids living at home now, in their 20s? Okay, all right? And your son or daughter is living with you, and they have a small thing, you know, that has contrasting colors because it's a business car or whatever, and they're parking in your driveway.
That's one.
I think that,
Yeah, that's the one,
but,
that's the one
right,
that's.
okay, but if the
He's
parents have
assuming
one.
his son has.
Okay, yeah, but
He's
that's the
not
perfect
sure. I'm not
situation.
sure.
But if your parents have one, if your dad has one, or your mother has one, and you have one, will you tell the kid to quit? Because I can only have one commercial vehicle in my driveway?
You won't be able to take it home.
In a lot of places, you have to take it home, because you may be on call. So I think it's a very narrow thing here, where you go to a certain plateau, and then you cross over to what I know that you are all talking about. I mean, I think there's a level here for the people that get cars for businesses and this and that, and then what you're talking about, big, commercial, I'll put it out there, landscaping trucks or whatever, that are in residential areas, and I think that's what your concerns are. I think you need to look back on this and make a distinction between,
The distinction is, and it defines commercial vehicle, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about specifically a plumber, or a landscaper, or a electrician, or whatever. We can't, we gotta define by what the law says as a
I
commercial
understand
vehicle, not as a type of business.
I understand.
And that's in here, commercial vehicle, and it specifies it right there.
You don't seem to be grasping the finer points of what I'm trying to say, no offense intended. But I'm saying that if you do this right across the board, you're gonna be ticketing some people's houses every night.
I've driven around the village extensively researching this and the other law. And to be honest with you, I didn't see a lot of houses where there were multiple commercial vehicles.
And that can never change.
Huh?
And that can never
It
change.
can change, anything can change, anything can change. If you get a summons and you don't agree with it, you can come to court and explain it to the judge, and the judge can dismiss it, the judge can do whatever.
That's a hardship over a law that you wanna just paint a broad brush with.
It's not a broad brush, it's very specific, it's a very specific vehicle that we're talking about.
You're talking about a vehicle that displays the registration of business owner's name permanently affixed in
You
characters.
didn't read the whole
such as
thing, you
breeches. I
didn't,
have
excuse
read
me.
the whole thing.
It says commercial vehicle, for the purpose of parking rules in this section, a vehicle or combination of vehicles designed, maintained, or used primarily for the transportation of raw materials or property, or for the provision of commercial or professional services bearing commercial license registration plates, shall be deemed a commercial vehicle.
Or.
Any vehicle which has any of the following characteristics shall be
Right.
deemed any of the following: 2 axles, 6 tires, 3 or more axles. A vehicle that displays a registrant's owner or business name permanently affixed in characters at least 3 inches high on both sides of the vehicle, with such displays being color contrasting on the doors, and again, bearing commercial registration plates. So it's not,
But he doesn't have to have all 4. In your
No, he
wording,
doesn't.
right,
He
it
doesn't.
could be any of those characteristics. So if somebody has a regular vehicle, pickup, small pickup, whatever, that has contrasting colors, the name of whoever he works for, commercial plate, he gets a ticket if his father has another vehicle in the driveway.
With a new law, yes.
And you don't see anything wrong with that.
I
no?
know.
Let me, can I ask you a question? You know where I live,
Yeah, I know where you live.
all right? My driveway's probably bigger than a lot of driveways in this whole village. And actually, I'm not living in a development, I'm living right on 94.
Yeah, but this is a local law for the village.
So then I should petition the village and make 94 all commercial, and you don't have to worry, then I won't have to worry. Right?
Because you just said you're talking about residential.
Okay, but 94, part of 94 is commercial, and the other part isn't.
It's a residential office.
Yeah, it's
Not
office,
commercial.
O and R, it doesn't, office residential, it doesn't have to.
Well, the owner has to live on that present for a whole lot. If you read the O&R, the owner of the business must live in the residence. They have that business
So,
there. Okay,
let's
I
talk about.
understand what we, you know, what you're doing here. I mean, you spelled it out with 6 tires. Pickup has 4. Van has 4.
They
A
can't
dual
have
axle
cars.
vehicle has 6. Or 3 or more axles.
I think we need to specify rear axle, if we're, that's how I would interpret it.
Commercial vehicles are from vehicles.
So you spelled it out with just 6 tires.
Because you say 2 axles.
Also,
then it makes it easier.
So you spelled it out that besides
You can make it more restrictive,
by the,
like the one in Deacon. Yeah, Terry?
Yeah, I had, well, first of all, DC vehicle is not a commercial vehicle, it's a governmental vehicle, so that question goes away. What is unclear to me is, are you saying you can't have 2 commercial vehicles on the property, but if one is garaged and not in open, does that make a difference?
Yes.
It does, so if somebody has, if one is, Mr. Jeffrey's garage is one, and it's not visible or anything along those lines, so in essence, you're blocking somebody from having 2 vehicles, even if one is not in visual sight, correct?
If you go on to 16226, it says not more than 1 commercial vehicle which is 9 feet or under in height may be parked or stored in the garage on residential property within the village of Washingtonville with structures.
What number is that one?
162, the new section that the attorney added, 162-26.
Dash 26, okay.
Yeah,
Number 2.
So, if you're indicating you can't have 2 commercial vehicles, how are you gonna enforce that if one is garaged? You gonna get a warrant to?
No, because it's gonna be garage.
Huh?
It's garage.
Yeah, but it says here no more than 1 maybe parked or stored in the garage. So if you have 1 in the driveway and 1 in the garage, you're indicating that person's in violation. Am I reading that correctly?
But a normal house garage, I don't think is even over 8 feet.
Yeah, most of them aren't 8 feet high.
Right.
So therefore,
So you
there's no
wouldn't get
issue
a- you
of
wouldn't
the
get
other
in there anyway.
vehicle going in the garage, because if it's 9 feet tall,
Right.
it's not gonna fit in 8
It
feet
wouldn't
high.
fit anyway. Right.
So, I mean, that issue wouldn't come. But there are other commercial vehicles that are not, that tall, as was pointed out. And my next question was basically irrelevant. I said, somebody built a carport, so, it's underneath the carport, that would be in violation also, correct?
Yep.
So, but I'm still asking this question, how are you gonna enforce if somebody has it in their garage, since it won't be visual? Are you gonna get an administrative warrant for a search warrant to go into the person's garage? Because you have probable cause to believe he's garaging a vehicle in there? I mean, to a certain extent, this is kind of like, it's nice to put it out there, but it's not gonna be enforceable. And the other question, just to talk to Mr. Jeffrey's issue, if you want to make an exemption, what if a nephew, the Supreme Court has made a decision, basically, you can't stop a family member defined as grandparent, son, daughter, even if they're paying rent, if you have a law saying, you know, it's only for one family, you can't, even if a son is living there and paying rent, you can't, if it's immediate family, you can't make that illegal. So cousins you can make illegal because they're not included in there, first cousins, aunts, uncles, or whatever. But as far as family is concerned, Supreme Court's actually held that because that was actually an ordinance on Long Island. And I find it hard to believe that, you know, that you're saying somebody can't garage it. I mean, that's basically saying private property, on person's private property is basically, and for what, I mean, is this under the health and safety, police power? I mean, if they have two vehicles and one is garage, is the issue that they're having two vehicles, or the issue that they're basically open to public inspection?
Say that again.
I'm saying that basically, if somebody has a vehicle, which is licensed and has registration inspected, and they park it in a garage, I mean, that's private property.
Yeah, we're not gonna,
So if you're saying you're not gonna enforce it if it's in a garage, and they have another commercial vehicle out in